Welcome back to the Motor Index, folks. Today, this is a big video, honestly. It is just full-blown drama in the NASCAR Cup Series right now with this whole next-gen debate. We're going to talk about the racing, the current state of the racing, what we think needs to happen to the car. But most importantly, this is actually a topic I've had to really need to address for a long time, and we're going to do it today. We need to define what is a good NASCAR race. I'm going to give you my definition. If you want to take it, take it. If you don't care, leave it. I don't care. I'm going to tell you what I think is a good NASCAR race because I think there's too many people who don't actually know what they want and they're speaking their mind out about it. And God bless them for doing it. But if you're going to speak your mind, you better know what you want if you're going to complain, because you can't complain about something if you don't know what you want. And I don't think a lot of NASCAR fans know what they want because they will just find a way to complain every 2 seconds. And, I'm not saying some of the complaints aren't necessarily valid, but, what's your alternative here? Would you rather watch what you watched on Sunday at Iowa where, there's, say what you want, some passing for the lead, whether that be on pit road, whether that be under green flag conditions, whatever. There were multiple leaders throughout the race, and say what you want. Tell me, would you rather have that, or would you rather have Kyle Larson leading 350 of 370 laps, or whatever it was? Would you rather have that, or would you rather have what we got? I'm just saying, because when we see those races, people find a way to complain about that. Well, now you got multiple leaders throughout the race. You have interesting enough strategy as far as my book. I don't know. I just think that race at Iowa has really sparked something as far, at least in me, because of seeing the reaction to it. And I'm like, guys, you guys would kill for this race on domination race weekends. You guys would kill for this race in so many weekends throughout the year. But because it wasn't a perfect race, it just doesn't meet the expectations. So whatever. Okay, so what do NASCAR fans want from each package? This is a big thing we've got to discuss because obviously we've hammered the super speedway, or not we have nailed the intermediate package. The intermediate package is spectacular. The racing is great for the most part, not perfect on every single track, but consistently time after time, it is pretty entertaining. The cars might get a little spread out over a longer green flag run, but the time it takes on the intermediates to get really spread out, by the time you're really spread out, you're looking at pit stops, and typically that's when going to throw a little more chaos into the mix. And then typically, as the second half of those green flag runs materialize, typically the battles for the lead get a little more competitive as you get to the end of the stages, or if you're in the third stage, by the end of the race. And I think, like we said, the intermediates are no problem whatsoever. And I would argue even that the road courses, for the most part, pretty fine. Yes, you do get SVG in Mexico City just bursting out to a 15-second lead on the final green flag run, but how you have to look at that situation is you have to remove SVG and then look at everybody below him, because we know SVG is just killing everybody. We know that. And I don't know if that's going to happen this weekend. That's beside the point. But if you remove SVG, that Mexico City race was actually very competitive, and it was actually really entertaining, and would have been a really entertaining race had SVG not stunk up the field in that final stage. So I actually think the road course racing's pretty fine, to be honest. Not perfect, because you can just get somebody who shows up to the racetrack with a rocket ship, but more times than not, I leave the road courses entertained, just like the intermediates. Short track racing's dead in the sport right now. It was not dead 4 or 5 years ago. It was great 4 or 5 years ago with the old car. And, I think we know a lot of what we want to see on the short tracks is you want to see the ability to beat and bang. How do we even define this? I think, is it that how are we able to give the leader more of a disadvantage? Because it feels like with the short track racing, once you've got that clean air, you can really start hammering down some good lap times. and, really put the guys behind you in the dust. And then by the time you're reaching lap traffic, like, you're so far ahead of people that it's not even really a thing. You're not racing anybody. How do we change that? I really don't know. I think I could sit here and say what we want to do to the car, but what does that end up looking like? I think it just looks like really having to think about when you're getting in and out of the gas, and like I think that's going to come with the horsepower and fixing the tires. But what does that actual racing look like? It's going to be a lot more closer and competitive, and I'm envisioning like seeing the in-car camera and listening to the throttles and how that's going to look. And I don't really even know how to put it into words, which is kind of the difficulty with this whole discussion, is that some of these things are kind of difficult to define with words. It's really about what you see. But yeah, I really think it really just comes down to, not getting these just single file, green flag runs where the leader is just completely destroying everybody. And then what do you got? I don't know. I think, yeah, you got to figure out a way to make the car perform in the dirty air better as they're approaching the car. Like, the car can't just die when they get instantly to the person. I don't know what the fix to that is. I don't know if that's an underbody issue, if that's, the car's frame issue or the height. I don't know. There's a lot of things they can do to the car to fix that. And we're going to discuss what we think needs to happen to the car after we go on and define what is a good race. But then as far as the super speedways are concerned, because that's the other aspect to this that really has been affected. I don't know, because it's hard. I think, I don't know. That the super speedway one is very tricky, because I don't think you're ever going to get rid of the fuel saving, but when the cars are running full throttle, there's got to be a way to pass. Because look, I do love the eye candy of the 4 wide and everything when they're fuel saving, but when they get back to full throttle, you got to be able to pass in some capacity, and it just does not exist right now. At least to the capacity it should exist. And I think a lot of people like to sit up here and play revisionist history with the Gen 6 era and the super speedway racing. And I'm not saying it was terrible in the Gen 6, but I think we put a lot of rose-tinted glasses on with the Gen 6. Like, let's not sit here and act like 75% of the racing towards the latter end of the Gen 6 super speedway era was just single file with Denny Hamlin leading or Kevin Harvick leading for 75% of the race, and then after the green flag run or the green flag pit cycle in the final stage commences, all hell breaks loose, which is great. I actually did enjoy a lot of those races. But let's not sit here and act like that's any different than the fuel saving that we're watching for 75% of the next gen super speedway races. They're the exact same thing. Now, what that tells me is, look, we're probably never going to get rid of that, because as far as the fuel saving and, saving your stuff and being careful till the end, that's always been an aspect of the super speedway racing. I think people need to appreciate just how difficult some of these things are during super speedway racing, like running the 4 wide while you're fuel saving. Just listen to the drivers' radios, them come over the radio and say, "Man, why are we driving this intense so early?" Well, it's not just eye candy. That is extremely hard to race in. You have to really conceptualize what you're watching there. I understand they're not like actively trying to force their way to the front in those situations, but that's not an easy thing to do, to run 4 wide lap after lap after lap around somewhere like Talladega. But I completely get the points on the super speedway racing. I would like to see them pushing it harder, but as we've just stated, when you push harder in the next gen car at these super speedways, you can't pass anybody. So I don't know exactly what the deal is. I think it all comes back down to the aero thing again, just like the short tracks. I don't know. I think they've mentioned the cars have too much drag. I think that's kind of what we've been mentioning. Now, how do we do that? I don't know. If I'm remembering right, Denny Hamlin was talking about this, how it's not the drag being caused by the body of the car, it's the height. And I don't know if that's necessarily, I think he might have been talking about the short tracks with that. Now, does that concept apply to the super speedways? I don't know. I'm not an expert on these engineering. I do have a good idea, but I'm far from an expert. So I don't know. That is a discussion we've got to get everybody involved in and be really, vocal and transparent about, because if not, the fans are going to be mad. I'm telling you right now. All right, next. Let's define what a good race is, because this is something that just fans have no clue what they're looking at. Like, I see the Gluck poll, and I'm like, every week I'm like sitting here thinking, all right, this is what I think it's going to be. And then it's just completely off. I'm like, what are these fans seeing that I'm not? As somebody who's sitting here watching the racing and dissecting it every single second that I'm watching it, but you have all these other people who disagree with me. How did we get to that point? Well, I don't know. But I'm going to sit here and tell you what I think is a good race, what I am looking for every single weekend to dissect or diagnose if that race is a good race or not. Here's the things that I've got. Strategy. And people are going to hate on this. Fuel strategy. That is a part of this. People act like the fuel strategy is just a complete, like, Mickey Mouse strategy. Oh, if you win on this, it's a fake win. It's like, give me a break. Like, come on. These fuel mileage produce exciting finishes for sure. But it's something you got to think about. And the best teams, they manage it the best. And strategy goes way beyond just that. Like, I could go on and on. Like, tire management. Managing your distances on the green flag runs and how hard you're pushing the car. All these things. So much goes into the strategy game. A lot of the times, especially on the short tracks and the super speedways, the strategy has gotten pretty bad. I'll just say that. Boring. Very boring. Though I think the Iowa race, I found that strategy to actually be pretty damn compelling, because people aren't going to acknowledge this, but on the longest green flag runs of the day, you were seeing significant tire wear. So, and obviously the fuel thing was that was the whole race on Sunday at Iowa, was the fuel strategy. And you can sit here and say, oh, well, we've had a bunch of fuel mileage races and whatever. Well, Indianapolis was only a fuel mileage race because of the cautions, and so was Iowa. So it's just how things break. That's the beauty of NASCAR racing. You don't know what you're walking into. You could walk into, a Darlington this year and watch William Byron nearly pull off a perfect race. Or you might walk into, say, in Iowa, and it might appear like, okay, we've got some really clean racing and the battles for the lead are fairly good. I mean, yes, we still have the short track issues, but, relatively speaking, this has probably been the best short track race of the year. And then all hell breaks loose with the cautions, completely upending the strategy. And, yes, one of the best 4 cars in the day won, but, how did he get there? How did he end up winning? You have to look back at how they ended up to that point, not just how it finished, what led to the finish. People need to think about all this stuff. That's where the strategy comes in. As far as the cars on track, yes, the top cars need to be competitive. And what I mean by that is not that, yes, what I partially mean by that is that the best cars can be in the middle of the pack and make their way to the front with relatively little issue. Obviously, you're going to be battling people, but you have the ability to make your way to the front if you are a better car. But the other aspect to that is when the best cars are racing at the front, they're not getting separated by 20 seconds from each other. Like, I think back to the race I was at Homestead, and the reason the whole race I was saying, all right, this is really setting up for a great finish, is because your top 10 cars are, A, the best cars in Cup, for one, but B, the cars are not, like, your delta between first and 10th was like 3.5 seconds. So the entire time, like, the leader, we always like try to say the leader's at a disadvantage. Well, if the leader's got somebody on his ass 24/7, and if second place has somebody on his ass 24/7, and so forth back to 10th, that's intense. That is like you were having to put down perfect laps, lap after lap after lap to keep that guy behind you. And that's, I think, what was the beauty of that Homestead race was how competitive the racing was at the front between the most competitive cars throughout long green flag runs. You were not getting these 10-second deltas between cars. That's what I consider to be, boring racing. I want the competitive cars on the track to be racing each other consistently lap after lap after lap and having to be perfect instead of getting those 10-second leads. And, I've got room to drop 4/10 of a second on this lap because I know I can just make it up on the next lap if I screw it up. No, I want there to be no room for error at the front. That's what we've been saying. And, that's something we have to define and look for if we're looking for competitive racing. All right. Next, driver has to manage the car. And this goes for several things. Fuel strategy, obviously, tires. But, somewhere like in Indianapolis or a Pocono, like, if you're pushing that car to the razor's edge 24/7, that's hard. That's difficult to manage. And, that's a part of, that kind of contradicts what I was saying, though, with the, main, or the leaders racing each other 24/7. But like at those types of tracks, that's what I want to see. I want to see at a Daytona where the guys in the back of the field can save their stuff a little bit and then move to the front. Like I want to see the driver be able to do different things with his car and have it make a difference. Like I think Ryan Blaney, for example, at these short ovals, especially the short flat ovals, able to save enough tire but keep enough time between him to where when he after he's done saving his tires and he goes, he's able to make up all that time. And we have seen that a lot of the times with at least Ryan Blaney, and that's something that he does well and not a lot of guys do well. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. I want to see a lot more of that where, I can do something different with my car and gain an advantage at a different point. Or, do something to my car now to get me to this point. Because if I don't do this to my car, I might not get to that point. Are you keeping up with what I'm talking about? All right. All right. Next, drama and big moments. Everybody likes to say, oh, well, the best car wrecked out of the race. Well, that's a big moment. That's a big story. Well, why did he wreck out of the race? These are things that, are storylines, and they, are memorable moments. If the leader is just leading for the whole race, why do I even need to tune in? I know who's going to win. I want to see the leader have adversity and have to work through it. Or if, say for example, leader is leading for 75% of the race, has a bad pit stop at the start of stage 3, instant wreck on the restart of stage 3, and that guy gets caught up into it. That's the drama I'm looking for. Not necessarily every week. I don't want that every week, but it's stuff like that, or let's say it's, Hocevar and Stenhouse getting tangled in the back of the field. That's a big moment that's going to cause some storylines and potentially some beef. Like, I want these things. I don't want these guys to, just be cleanly racing each other like in F1 and then going and shaking hands and being buddies and going out on our yachts after the race. No, I want there to be drama. I don't want these guys to like each other. I want these guys to have beef with each other and want to go out there and destroy each other on the racetrack. I don't want these stupid F1 guys. Oh, like good racing, chap. You didn't wreck me into turn 1 because you raced me clean. Thank you, bud. It's like, I don't care. Your racing sucks. I want to see drama. Oh, well, this guy wrecked this guy. Yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, these guys are going to have beef now. Yeah, that's fun. And you see it in F1 very little, but it's like, with how neutered the racing is, you don't get that. You get this in NASCAR, though. Another aspect to, the cars being able to go from the back of the field to the front is the ability to make the car better throughout the race. I don't want it to be kind of like Dover a few weeks ago, where beginning of the race was like complete chaos. Not complete, but there was a lot of comers and goers. But then as they worked on the cars, then there was like no comers and goers. I want there to be where, okay, you get something at this portion of the race, people work on their cars, some cars get better, some cars get worse, and those cars ascend to the top and fall back. But then those cars that fell back, they can do something, work on the car, then they can make their way back to the front. That's the cat and mouse game of the strategy that I really want to see. And we get that at a lot of racetracks. I think of Las Vegas. I think of pretty much all the intermediates. You kind of get stuff like that. When the short track racing is really good, you get that. Really don't get it on the super speedways just because of how dominant aero and track position is. But yeah, when having the ability to wake up your race car and do specific adjustments to it to wake it up, because there are tracks where you just don't even get that. So that is a big aspect of what I'm looking for in a good race. Okay, and then one of my biggest aspects of this is letting the natural racing dynamics play out while sprinkling in a little bit of chaos. And I keep going back to that Homestead race in the fall of 2024 last year. Look at that last green flag run. You get kind of everything gets drawn out, and you get the green flag pit cycle, and Reddick stays out long and waits as long as he can, but eventually has to pit, and then it becomes clear, all right, the natural way this race is playing out, it's going to be a battle between Blaney and Larson for the win. Then Larson has that big moment where he sends it a little too hard, wrecks himself, brings out the caution, the break Tyler Reddick needs. That's the little sprinkle of chaos, because things were allowed to play out for a while, but you threw a dash of chaos in there. And now I don't want necessarily every race playing out that way, but if you throw a little dash of chaos, kind of like the Iowa race, cleaned for a lot of the race, dash of chaos at the beginning of stage 3, completely threw a wrench into how the strategy played out. That's the type of stuff I'm talking about. I don't want it every week, but I want it, throw me a little dash of chaos throughout each race. Like, whether it's at the beginning, whether it's at the end, but, I want to see the green flag racing, play out so we can kind of see what everybody's got, but I want that little uncertainty that, hey, we might have to change things here. I want that in the back of everybody's head 24/7, and I want it to play out every now and then. So, some racing purists who are probably just F1 fans will hate that. But your racing league is also extremely boring and is only good because of the propaganda. So, I don't know. I think NASCAR provides much more entertaining racing, and when that's kind of a part of the thing, it's great. And finally, a concept that I think people need to understand as far as defining good racing is the fact that just because the best car or driver on the day did not win does not make it a bad race. I mean, I can think of so many examples of this, but you do have a portion of the community who is obsessed with, all right, the best car needs to win every single week. Well, no, I don't think so. I think this isn't F1 racing where the race is decided from turn one. This is a long marathon, and you have to maintain being good for a much longer duration of time. And if you can't do that, then you don't deserve to win. But if you're one of these cars who maintains, being inside the top 4 or 5 throughout the whole day, and you put yourself in position to capitalize on those mistakes, I think that's just as good of a win, if anything. Now, look, I get why the Logano win at Nashville is very controversial, because he was running 14th at the time of the first overtime, and then everybody in front of him runs out of fuel, and then he ends up winning. I get that. But that's kind of the part of Dash of Chaos I like. You don't know what you're walking into every single week. You might just get a clean race, or you might just get complete unmitigated mayhem. You have no clue what you're walking into. That's what makes this sport special. But like I said, get that concept out of your guys' head that the best car winning every week automatically makes it good racing. It does not. You want that dash of chaos, and that's what makes, that's why in F1 the podium is such a big thing, and why we have to acknowledge top 3s, top 5s, top 10s in NASCAR is because they put themselves in position to capitalize if the leader screwed up. That is just racing. People need to accept that. All right. Now, all right. let's wrap this up with what needs to happen to the car in the off season. Everybody's got their ideas. I'm not really going to be reinventing the wheel here. I saw the video with Ryan Preece earlier today, him talking about where they just need to take all the NASCAR guys to a short track, pump these cars up to 1,000 horsepower, and just work and just see what happens and work off that and go. And if it completely blows all the tires, all right, let's back the cars down to 950 and see what happens. All right, keep blowing up the tires, 900. Throw them out there, see what happens. Just take the Cup guys to a track this offseason for an entire week and just figure this out. I think every single Cup Series driver will be willing to do that. And throw some other things at it. Let's take off that underbody. Let's see what happens when we do that. Let's screw with the heights of the car and see what happens. Let's take off some drag, even off the body, if that's what it takes. Though I know there's not really much to take off the body as far as drag is concerned, but if there's anything we can do, try it. I don't know if it's anything to do with the spoilers. I'm not sure exactly what the spoiler height is right now, but you've got to do something. But I think the horsepower is the biggest thing. I think we've probably reached our limit on tires. I don't see how you can go any more softer on tires without potential big time issues. As much as we loved the Bristol race last year, that's not sustainable. That cannot be the norm. I loved it, but there's a reason why that's a one-off crazy race that everybody's going to remember, because it was so completely chaotic and off the rails. That can't be every single short track. We got to replicate what we had and what we have currently on Saturdays in the Xfinity Series. And I think it's just the horsepower and making sure that if those guys are stomping on the gas, they're going to be punished for it, and make that, turn it into an art. We've got it on Saturdays for the most part. Not, and I think people do blow up the Saturday, the Xfinity being better thing just a little bit, though I completely agree. I think it is the most entertaining series in NASCAR, but I don't think it's perfect either. But I think we can get as close to perfect as we can if we, take some of these things that I've mentioned. Other things I've heard, the shifting. I've heard that's an issue. They want to fix that. There's loads of things that we've got to fix on this car. But the fact of the matter is this: if NASCAR does not take a huge swing at this in the offseason, they've completely lost it. Completely. Look, I don't think the racing is as bad necessarily in general as people are making it out to be right now, but that does not mean they should stand stagnant. This can be miles better than it is currently. Though, like I said, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. But if we're not going to sit here and take some open heart surgery this offseason, these people are crazy if they don't do that. So, Last thing I want to do before I head out of here, I tune into this. One of the biggest reasons I tune into NASCAR every week is because of the amazement that I get out of 40 of these guys hopping into their race cars, putting their lives on the line every single weekend, and their families put the sacrifice that their families make, the sacrifice that the men and women on pit road make, and their families make. This is an intense, dangerous job every single week. Now, you could sit here and say, well, we haven't lost a driver since Dale or whatever, but how many drivers have gotten injured? How many pit crew members have gotten injured or damn near close to killed? Like, the bravery and the absolute cojones on every single person putting their lives on the line every single weekend, that alone is enough for me to tune into these races, let alone if these races turn out, below average as far as an entertainment value. But that should not diminish the heroicism that you're watching every single week on the racetrack. So I just think that's something that people need to really appreciate. And I know that can be something that is a little difficult to appreciate if you have not been to a race. That's why it's so imperative to get to a race and really conceptualize it in person, because this ain't just driving around in circles. This is one of the highly intense sports in the world. And I never leave a NASCAR race unsatisfied. Let's just say that. So, yeah. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. And if you want more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. And thank you guys. God bless.